some absolutely badass fighters on the UFC roster who had the potential or were even great at one point. But I think that one fight took absolutely everything from them. And to this day, they still have not recovered. And the thing is, this could be for one of two very distinct reasons. Either one, there is somebody out there that is better, that can completely and utterly dominate you, and they know that there's absolutely nothing that they can do to ever get on that level. That's number one. Number two, they know in their heart of hearts that they could have, should have, would have beaten this guy if only. But that if only never transpired. And I'm going to be getting into a list of these fighters right here, right now. But before I do, if you wouldn't mind, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Helps with the algorithm, helps grow the channel. So let's talk about the first and most obvious one that we can all think of. And that's Conor McGregor. Honestly speaking, I think Conor McGregor, his fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, he still to this day has not recovered from that loss. From pillar to post, every minute of that fight, Khabib was winning, dominating, and there wasn't a damn thing Conor McGregor could do about it. Right? It got to the point where Khabib has him right there in a neck crank. He taps, and if Khabib had held on, who knows what would have happened, right? Good thing a ref was there to kind of step in. Because I don't think Conor McGregor has recovered at all from that performance. He's taking time off, gun shy, drinking, partying, all of this kind of stuff. And even in his last few outings, with the exception of that Cowboy Cerrone fight, he did not look like himself. He did not look like the guy that was coming up and rising, in the early 2010s, 2014, 2015, 2016, like the absolute superstar that he was, right? He looked like a shell of his former self when it comes to being a fighter. And I think no matter who he faces, no matter who he fights, no matter how much money, no matter how much success he has, like I've said before in previous videos, that competitor inside him knows that there is someone better than me and there isn't a damn thing I could have done about it. And that stings, right? Another example of this, someone who is never the same after one fight, is Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa had this reputation of being like a bull in a china shop, a guy who would charge forward, throw caution to the wind, absolutely go to war. His fights with like Yoel Romero was something of legend, something of memory. Just absolutely fearless. And then he comes across Israel Adesanya, who basically picks him apart for the entirety of that fight, finishes the fight, and then dry humps his backside, right? To this day, I don't think Paulo Costa has recovered mentally from that beating. I think that the fights he has against Robert Whittaker, the fight he had against Sean Strickland, in both cases, he was playing it very safe. Point fighting, kickboxing. He actually looked pretty decent in the Whittaker fight. He looked like he was backing up the whole time against Strickland. But nevertheless, the guy that we saw, that warrior, that bull in the china shop, the guy that marches forward, like that guy has not come to play since that Israel Adesanya fight, right? He looked terrible against Marvin Vettori. He missed weight. There's the Luke Rockhold thing. I think that he won that. And then after that, again, another couple of losses, right? And I think it goes back to like that whole thing where, okay, there's somebody better than me and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it, right? Israel Adesanya was better than him in every minute of every second of that fight. He beat him completely and utterly dominated him. and no matter what Paulo Costa would have, could have, should have, would have done there, I don't think it would have changed the result, because Izzy was in the zone then. He was so hard to hit. He was hard to grab. He was hard to place. You know, those feints were insane. Like, prime Izzy was a force to be reckoned with. And Paulo Costa saw that, and there wasn't anything that he could do to deal with that. There are a couple of guys who have not recovered from these losses. And it isn't necessarily because the person was better than them or heads and shoulders above them in terms of skill or performance or anything like that. But I think it's mostly because they know in their heart of hearts that they are better, that they can compete with these guys. But due to various circumstances, it just didn't go their way. And one of those guys is Kamar Usman. I don't think he's completely recovered from that head kick loss to Leon Edwards. And that's not to say that that wasn't a spectacular kick. And that was not to say that Leon didn't deserve that and didn't deserve the subsequent win. Right? But I think it's just one of those things that Usman knows in his heart of hearts. And maybe I'm just biased because I love Kamar Usman, right? But I think he knows in his heart of hearts that he could have, should have won that fight. Like, if only I had, you know, covered up a little better, saw it coming, prepared a little more, right? I could have turned things around. I could have lasted that extra minute or two, and the conversation we'd be having today would be far different, right? It could have been a situation in their fight right after that where Usman, you know, he's a bit gun shy from that knockout, and he knows in his heart of hearts, like, I could have beat Leon, but I was just, like, maybe I came back a little bit too soon. Faced off against him a bit too early. You know, couldn't really get that groove back that I used to have in my title fight scenarios. And now he's kind of carrying that loss with him to this day because of the fact that he knows that he can beat Leon. I believe that if they were to fight 10 times, Usman would win, you know, 6 to 7 of those times, right? But that's not how life is. That's not how things go. And the reality is that fight's probably never going to happen again. And because of it, you know, some of those accolades that Usman was looking for, it's probably never going to be the same. Like, he's probably never going to be in the zone the way he was during his championship reign, right? And so that's got to sting almost as much, right? Knowing that, like, oh, there's this guy, I can beat him. I know I can beat him. I've beaten him before. I was beating him for you know, 23 out of the 25 minutes of that fight. And he caught me, and then I was never the same, right? That's got to sting. Another example to me is Israel Adesanya. And let me ask you guys this. Do you think that Izzy, for some reason, I don't know, I've got it in my mind that Izzy, ever since he beat Pereira that one time, he's kind of like, I don't know, like his purpose, his raison d'etre, like, it's gone from MMA or UFC or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But anyway, the Sean Strickland fight. And it's still early, right? Like, we're going to see him fight in Saudi. We're going to see if he can come back and face off Imavov, which, like, skill-wise, I definitely think he's got a really good chance. But it's one of those things, right? Like, is his mojo gone? You know, he had to take that break after the Strickland fight. A lot of people were thinking, like, oh, he didn't prepare for Strickland, which is why he performed so badly. But Strickland, obviously, we've seen, like, he could go toe-to-toe with most of the guys in the division other than Pereira and, like, make it really competitive. You know what I mean? But we, like, his fight against Duplessis, he looked good up until he didn't, I thought, right? But it still is one of those things, like, you know, I think he thinks, and I'm sure he thinks, no, like, if only I'd prepared a little better, you know, hadn't taken it on short notice, taken it a bit more seriously, something like that, like, I could have beaten Strickland, right? I could have beaten that guy, but I didn't, you know? And so I think, you know, he still hasn't really recovered from that. And who knows, maybe age is a factor. You know, I've heard things that the stuff at City Kickboxing became a bit toxic. I've heard a lot of different things, but I think that loss is going to haunt him for a while because he didn't do his best. Who knows, right? I could be wrong. Maybe Strickland is just that guy, right? But that's another example of fights and fighters that are still haunted by a single. And I think the last one I'm going to mention is Tony Ferguson and that fight against Justin Gaethje. If you guys don't remember, Tony Ferguson was the favorite going into that fight, and Justin Gaethje absolutely destroyed him in every minute of every round, right? He was absolutely brutal. That might have been one of the most one-sided beatings, one of the top 5 most one-sided beatings in UFC history, right? Tony was supposed to win that fight, but it got to, he took so much damage that night, and he has never been the same. And I don't know what it is. If it was the fact that I don't know which one it is, right? I think it's more of there was nothing he could have done there. Gaethje exposed a lot of weaknesses in his game. Gaethje was absolutely on point. He was hitting hard. He was doing a phenomenal job. And Tony has lost every fight since that day, right? And the thing about Tony was he was always a guy that took a lot of damage and could eat a lot of shots, but he somehow managed to pull through, right? With his pace, his cardio, he'd never get tired, just an absolute dog, absolutely relentless, everything like that. But since then, it's just been, all that damage prior to the Gaethje fight and sustained in that Gaethje fight. And then since then, it's just been one L after another, right? And something broke in that fight. Maybe it was Tony's spirit, maybe it was the damage, but ever since then, he's just looked progressively more lost inside the octagon every single time he fights. And, as they say, Father Time is undefeated, right? And, but that was one fight that I think that will haunt Tony forever. He's never winning another fight, that is for sure. And, it boils down to that one performance. So these are just a few of my fights that I think fighters have absolutely never recovered from. Let me know what you think. Is there anything that I left out? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you next time.